on the air, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead now.
Yes.
Oh. I'm calling the Wednesday, September 9th Economic Development Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's Economic Development Commission meeting will be held virtually by Zoom and in person while following social distancing guidelines. The public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person or join via online Zoom. If attendees experience audio problems, we suggest you leave the meeting and then rejoin. This has usually fixed the issue. Additional instructions on how to participate are posted online at burnsvillemn.gov in the public meeting calendar. As usual, tonight's meeting is available for viewing on BCTV and on the city's website. You may participate in the meeting tonight online by going to zoom.us/join and typing in meeting ID 984-5082-6445. Once you are logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you wish to speak to. You may also call into the meeting at 651-372-8299 and enter meeting ID 984-5082-6445. And now on to the agenda. The first item of tonight's meeting is the adoption of the agenda. Do any members of the commission have any changes to the agenda? Staff, do you have any changes to the agenda?
None from staff.
Right. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda then?
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
And I will have to do a roll call, just a heads up.
Yep. It's like a motion by LaFavor, sorry, and a second by Anderson. Move to, yep,
oh, go ahead.
for
Go
a roll
ahead.
call, yep. Go ahead, Regina.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuplik,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFavor,
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveter. I believe you're on mute.
Aye, sorry.
Commissioner Schmitz.
Aye.
And the motion carries. To second agenda item, approval of the July 8th, 2020 Economic Development Commission meeting minutes. Staff, are there any changes to the meeting minutes?
None from staff.
Anything from the commission? Any changes?
Good.
Looking for a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Anderson, looking for a second. Second by Kuplik. And Regina, do a roll call?
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuplik,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFavor,
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveter.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Schmitz.
Aye.
The motion passes. And on to agenda item number 3 here. Election of the chair. Regina will provide a presentation and give an item overview of the background of this. Regina?
Thank you. Just a brief presentation. Our current chair is Commissioner Newman and vice chair is Folkstead. I inquired with the commission via email to see if there was any interest in serving in either the chair or vice chair capacity. Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Fitchett, and Commissioner Newman all expressed interest in chair or vice chair capacity. Certainly, both of the items, chair and vice chair, are open for discussion, and I encourage you to discuss each of the chair and vice chair recommendations prior to making your recommendation and motion. So first up is chair.
So before we get into that, I just want to say, yeah, I'm happy to continue becoming the chair if you so elect me to do so, but also recognize that I'd like to, kind of rotate and give other people the opportunity to be the chair as well. So with that, we can open discussion on the chair, people who feel want to be elected into that position, or if you have any interest.
Commissioner Anderson, what is your preference?
I volunteered to be vice chair if no one else had spoken up, so I'm just very fine with
Yeah.
Mr. Newman.
And Commissioner Newman, this is would be your second year, is that right?
This would be my second year if I was elected, yes.
And so do we have the other commissioner on? I cannot see here. Is the other commissioner candidate on?
Commissioner Fitchett is having trouble logging into the Zoom meeting. She is not on currently. And I have not heard from Commissioner Volstead.
Okay. And the commissioner what is her last name again?
Crystal Fitchett?
Fitchett. Is she voiced an interest in chair or vice chair? Or?
She did voice an interest in either position.
You know, from a chair standpoint, since that's the topic of discussion from my viewpoint, I think Commissioner Newman's doing a great job. I think as long as he still has interest and a passion, I don't think 2 years is too long. And I recommend that we continue on that path. That's my personal recommendation.
Anything online from Laura, Chris, Al, Dan?
I agree with Commissioner LaFever. I think Mr. Newman's doing a fine job, and 2 years seems appropriate, so.
I also agree with Mr. LaFever. Mr. Newman's been doing a great job.
Thanks, everyone. So someone has to make a motion if they want to elect for a chair. So looking for a motion or other
I
discussions.
move Commissioner Newman be elected as chair for this coming year for the commission.
I'll second that motion.
So we have a motion by Anderson, second by LaFever to recommend Chair Newman as the chair. I'll pass it over to Regina for a roll call.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuplick,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFever,
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveter,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmitz.
Aye.
Motion carries on the chair. So moving over to vice chair, open it up to discussion. Looks like we had interest with Anderson, Fitchett. I think Cleveter, you had interest in vice, I think, as well. It could be a great opportunity for Anderson. I think that's where I'd put my vote for right now. I don't know. Up to anyone else on the commission? Online?
Yeah, it's unfortunate the other candidate isn't on. So
You know, it'd be nice to have.
I would
Fitchett
certainly,
too.
Mr. Anderson's a good participant, I would endorse him also.
Mr. Anderson, this
Can I-
is your second year on the committee, is that right?
Correct.
We can always come back to the item if you want to pause us to see if Commissioner Fitchett's able to join us due to technical difficulties.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
I think it'd be fine.
That sounds like
Just a
good
point of
idea.
clarification, though, Commissioner Fichette, this is her first year on the commission.
No,
correct?
second,
This is her second as well?
yes.
No, is that right?
What's your second?
It will be
I think,
her full second year. She'll be starting.
So
or
she
she's
started at
starting
the
her
same time as
second year.
Miss Commissioner Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't seen anything from her.
yeah, let's pause, agenda item number 3, move it back to the last item here and move on to item number 4. Can we just go right on to item number 4? Do we have to make a motion to pass it to the last item?
You could move on.
Move on? Okay. We'll pause this one and come back to it and move on to agenda item number 4, discussion on economic development strategic plan, goal number 4. I'll pass it over to Jenny Faulkner, who'll give you a little presentation and overview and background of this.
Thank you,
agenda
Mr.
item.
Chair, Commissioners. You may recall about a year and a half ago, we adopted the Economic Development Strategic Plan. So this December will be 2 years since it's been adopted. So we have 5 goals outlined in the plan, and this is what it looks like. I think you all got a copy of this in some way, shape, or form. And so we want to get things going on goal number 4, which is to enhance and build awareness around our existing housing and commercial programs and develop new programs as appropriate. So to get us started with this, we've asked Jason Arsvold from Ellers, so they're the ones who helped us prepare this plan, to kind of walk us through preparing a strategy for these housing and commercial programs, similar to how he helped guide us through the development tools policy work last year. I thought that was a very effective process that the council and the EDC went through to get to the end. So Jason is here to help us with that. I did list in the background the 7 specific strategies that were called out in the plan, and listed the link to the plan just as a refresher if you needed that. And we also included some information in our background from May of last year where we presented some different tools that other cities are using, just as a reference of what's out there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Arsvold, and he has a brief presentation, and then the discussion will be yours. We're looking for feedback tonight as we kick this off.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Again, Jason Arsvold with Ellers. So just a few things that we wanted to cover tonight, really just talking a little bit about housing statistics, just so you have some context for the discussion. I always think that's helpful. A little background about some of the potential tools and resources that are out there, many of which, you're already using in your community. But the big one, and that's why it's highlighted there, and Jenny alluded to this, is that what we want is to understand what your priorities are and what outcomes you'd like to see for housing in Burnsville. And so I want to spend the most time on that and give you the opportunity, because that really is going to inform the basis for what we ultimately come back with to you. We don't need you to all to decide the how part. We just want you to talk about what you want to see, and let the staff kind of give you some ideas about how to do that. And then a little bit about what the next steps might look like. So just really quick, we looked at this chart when we talked about the strategic plan back in 2018, and it's updated with more current data, just median sales prices. And I think that it's an indicator of where your housing market is at, and I think it's just helpful to set some context. And it's not any big surprises here. The one thing that we kind of looked at this is that one thing you see is if you look on the far left side of the chart, where Burnsville was pretty much on par with a couple of cities there in the Twin Cities Metro in the orangish color. And as you fast forward to 2020, that there's a little bit of a disparity growing there in where those values are trending. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. It doesn't mean that there's a problem. It's just some helpful background and context as we think about what we want to accomplish on a going forward basis. Housing tenure, which is just really owner, renter, occupied. This question comes up all the time. Do we have too many rental properties? Do we have not enough? Do we need more of a diversity of rental? I use the same peer communities as a comparison. Some of those maybe aren't the best comparisons from an owner to renter tenure kind of standpoint, but you've got Burnsville, you're about 35%, 35.5% rental, which, that's a reasonable ratio of rental housing. This is 2018 data though, and I know that you've added several multifamily properties since then. So this is the most recent available from the census to make apples to apples comparisons. So that's all gonna shift a little bit, and that's just something to think about as you go forward. Now, we work in a lot of communities where these ratios are flipped, right? Like a city like Hopkins is 65% rental and 35% owner occupied, and, perfectly healthy cities, good school systems. So it's not an indicator of, anything other than just it's information for you as you're thinking about housing policy in the city. This is rental licenses, is another one we like to look at to see if there's any trends happening in the rental licensing, particularly in neighborhoods. And this is pulled straight out of the 2018 annual report. I think there's a term for it, Jenny, that I can't remember the name of right now.
Monitoring report.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it was the most recent available with trend data associated with it. And, when I think about how the city's going to impact policy or programs on a going forward basis, I tend to focus on single family rental housing, right? What's happening in the single family housing stock with rental trends? And if you look at this one, you look back in 14 and there were 333 single family rentals and then you're down to 279 in 2018. So kind of when we look at this, or you look at, are there any big trends? You know, I think part of the job of a community development department is to make sure that you're always looking at change that's happening out there in the community and being able to respond and react to that. And so if you start seeing things happening, you want to be able to move quickly to be able to counteract some of those things, and so they don't adversely impact your neighborhoods. Not that, you know, having single-family rentals is a bad thing, but, you know, too many of them might start to tip a neighborhood into a situation that you don't necessarily, you didn't ever intend. And so I like to look at that. Same thing, and we didn't have it with foreclosure data, but it's a good one and a lesson back from the early 2000s. You could watch those trend right up, and it was a call to action if you're a staff person when you started to see that. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Are you okay if we interrupt you along the way?
Yeah, please do. I don't, this is totally conversational. We're pretty casual here, so please interrupt whenever you need to.
So I'm looking at this graph on the rental licenses. I guess my question to you is, I don't know how this data is captured, if it's publicly advertised rental units or how that's captured, but in light of Airbnb these days, do we feel like we're fully capturing the units that are for lease, and the trend down is just simply because we're not capturing it in the same way and we're missing things?
Well, and maybe the staff can speak to this, but I do know that you are tracking short-term rentals like Airbnb type uses, right? And there is some problem often with single-family rentals not actually getting a license, and thereby before you wouldn't know that they're licensed. But I do know you're also doing some tracking around trying to ferret those out, right? Looking at records and trying to decide, is this maybe a rental? And I think, because I looked at some of the reporting showed, you know, potential unlicensed rentals and looked at those numbers too. So I think the city's trying to make sure that it's fully accounting for every rental situation and making sure it gets a license and inspection. That's my understanding now, if there's anything to add to that.
Yeah, so the source of this data is our actual rental licenses. So those are those folks that are complying, getting the license and the inspection. The census data is usually a little different because that's people replying to the survey of what they're getting. So we do break it out by like townhomes in an association, because those are easy for people to rent out, but they are managed by an HOA, so it's kind of in a different class. And then the single families, and then the conversions there are new single family or individual rental units. So you can see the trend in that as well.
So, Ms. Faulkner, do you believe that this app appropriately captures what's really going on?
Yes, from year to year to year, it does.
Okay.
We're missing some, but I would say we're missing the same amounts every year.
And I would say this local data generated from your own records, right, is generally the most reliable. I mean, the census data, again, has got a lag associated with it. There's some projecting that they do, right, off of the decennial census, so you kind of have some noise in there, but this is what we like to see when we're trying to make decisions about what to actually do as a community and what kind of programs to implement.
Thank you.
So that's rental licenses. You know, the other one, code enforcement violations, and this is again straight out of that annual report table that I mentioned, again, city tracked, right? So you take a code enforcement action, there's a record associated with that. This gets reported out in your annual reports. And, you know, I think again with this, you got to be a little careful, but you're just trying to look for trends. I mean, are there categories that we're seeing that are becoming problematic? And if so, is there something we need to do about that? And as I look at this, nothing jumps out at me right away, right? I mean, there's some more exterior structure complaints that I noted in there, but that are happening and I don't know if you'd call it a trend, but sometimes with this type of data, when there's more inspections, you find more violations. So you kind of can't just look at it in a vacuum. You need to kind of take all that into consideration.
And I will add, if I can, Mr. Chair, to this, is that this is through 2018, and there have been significant changes in the codes related to this since then. So, for instance, the first one, trash cans, #1 violation consistently for decades, right? Council made a change to the ordinance last year to now allow trash cans to be in view. They no longer have to be 100% screened. So the number of complaints in that or violations goes down because what may have been non-compliant at one point is now compliant. Also, the council made a significant change in code enforcement in changing from being proactive, where we would drive around the city every 3 years, cover every neighborhood, to being complaint-based only, the way we used to be prior to, I want to say, 2008. And so we, we expect complaints to go up because of that, but the violations may go down because there's no proactive activity. So it's gonna take a while for those numbers to wash out, but there will be changes in the data of what we can track. We won't be tracking trash cans in view, or it's a different code now, so you can't compare the apples to apples, so.
That's all important background, because again, there's so much nuance that goes into this, but, you know, just some high level, just so as we start to think about some of this and some of the things that you all wanna see in the community. So just jumping into tools and resources, so any, you know, I tend to think about this, you know, we talked about it in the strategic plan as a housing policy, we also talk about it as a program. I think it's both. I mean, I think what we're talking about here is more of an overarching housing strategy. And when we start looking at what tools and resources are available out there, the intent of this just diagram is just so you understand it's not a one source kind of a deal, right? I mean, we just talked about code enforcement, so that's one of your regulatory tools, and that's probably the most effective tool in the toolbox that you have by far, right, to maintain your property within the community. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what those are. You have resources that the city, you know, generates, right? Whether it be through a levy or whatnot, they're city dollars. And then there are other outside resources that are there that are available to your residents just by virtue of the fact that, you know, they're available to all Minnesotans, right? For Minnesota Housing, for example, is a source of funding. So when we put together a strategy, we're gonna be trying to draw from all those places, not just one place, and leverage everything to the best of our ability here to bring the goals forward that you want to see as far as housing is concerned. So just briefly, some of the city resources, again, I think staffing is probably the biggest one. And I think if you can, you know, a lot of times there are resources that just exist and are available to residents. I mentioned the Minnesota Housing resources. There are others that are out there. Sometimes residents just don't know about those things, right? So a city, and I know you do a lot of this as it is, so this isn't something that is new, but an important role that a staff can play is just as somebody that can connect your residents to all those available resources, right? It's just a one-stop shop for people that don't know where to go. You can help them with a list of all the things that are available to your residents, right? And you can understand what their need is and then try to fit them in with the thing that's gonna help them the most. So that's a city resource. It takes staff time, right? But it's other than the staffing cost, there's not necessarily a monetary piece that goes along with that. You know, more proactive and systematic investment. So you can if you start seeing areas that need to be targeted, and right now you might be scatter investment, right? You might just have broad-based and existing resources that are just broadly focused. You might decide that, no, we've got an area in the city that we really would like to focus on. Maybe you want to bring those resources and bring them to bear just on one specific area. It's another way to kind of use the same amount of money in a targeted way, essentially, is what we're talking about there. You know, direct funding, so you can actually, if you have priority programs, you can reallocate existing funds for broad programs throughout the city. You can add new funds, right? You can levy as a community if you so choose to add to your tools that you have available. So that's another way to do that. You know, it's a task or a tax impact. You know, you can think about budgeting through your various sources for marketing, awareness, and outreach. I mean, this is one of the things we talked about in the strategic plan, was just this idea that people just weren't aware, right, of the things that you might have already be doing or you have available. So doing a little more around outreach and marketing there. Again, that might not be, you know, a huge line item in the budget, but you might need some printing or advertising expenses that go into that. And then just as I talked about the monitoring trends that are going on out there to anticipate what those changes are. So, you know, if you don't have staff that's constantly looking at what's happening in the market and what's going on with your housing stock, sometimes you wake up one day and you realize, you know, boy, we've really got a big problem. I use the foreclosure example. A lot of places, you know, it didn't just happen overnight. You know, we kind of feel like we woke up one day and everybody's house was foreclosed, but it took a long time to really get there. And you could really see that start happening in the data. If you look historically in a lot of communities, there was kind of a consistent low amount of foreclosures annually, and it just kind of little thing blips up, and it kind of keeps going, and you can see that happening. So if you've got somebody there doing that, that's also very helpful, just to be able to react quickly and be in position to do something about it. Talked about regulatory tools, so, your zoning code, your ordinances, those are all things that can shape housing in your community, whether it be through new development, redevelopment, or maintenance of existing housing. So those are all things that you have at your disposal to be able to shape housing in the city. Rental licensing and inspections, you're doing this, but it's a good way to make sure that rental housing is maintaining a certain standard, and that you're aware of where those properties are. I mean, that's a helpful aspect of a licensing program. We talked a little about code enforcement. That's a regulatory tool. You can do that on a proactive or a reactive basis. I think Jenny already explained where you're at in terms of a city here, but there's a way you can do that. Yeah, question?
Specifically, code enforcement, have the number of positions in that area changed with the proactive versus reactive?
Because of, the change went into effect in 2020, I believe. And then when COVID hit and we had a position opening, so we have an unfilled position right now that we put on hold because of this. Our code cases on the complaint side have changed a lot, and our processes have also changed. So we've added more, Jason has education on here, so we've added another step in the process. The first step now is that someone gets an education letter from the city, a did you know kind of letter, that we don't necessarily give folks a set amount of time to comply with. We kind of get to it when we get to it, so it's extended the compliance period, but that takes more resources to manage when you add different steps to the process. So it's kind of a wait and see, I would say, on complaints. Don't necessarily go hand in hand with the resources just because we're not doing proactive, because they can be complaint driven. So if we're not doing it and people that have that expectation, they have every right and ability to file a complaint with the city, and they do. So I don't have the full answer for that yet, but we're monitoring it, and we have an unfilled position that we've left unfilled because of COVID, so.
And so, yeah, again, I did education on here too, and Jenny alluded to that. Some places through their proactive efforts, and I imagine you probably did this while you were doing it proactively, but and it's kind of a little bit of a bedside manner thing, right? Nobody likes to have the city knocking at their door telling them their property needs to be fixed up. So, a lot of times, that education piece will be the first sort of entree into this, right? So if you pick a neighborhood, which is what you did, you kind of broke things up geographically and focused on a particular neighborhood, and then went to the next one and the next one after that. A lot of times, cities will start with education about the codes, generally speaking, before they go in there and start, issuing notices to people about that they need to fix things. So there's just ways that you can employ those tools to get what it is you're looking for. And then I talked about outside resources. So obviously, you've got the county active here, funding programs. Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, has fix-up funds available to everybody, right? So if you need a home improvement loan, you can, everybody can go through them, and if they meet those requirements, access financing through that agency. Grant funds, that might be out there. You've got some lists here. Federal Home Loan Bank, one of the kind of lesser-known sources that's out there, but they provide dollars for things like home down payment assistance and things of that nature, and award grants to communities to, conduct those kinds of programs. So you can supplement your existing core strategy with other outside resources. And at the bottom, again, like I talked about, just making people aware that these resources exist might be enough to meet your needs, right? If someone comes in and says, look, I really need a loan to fix up my house, well, geez, we don't offer that, but you know what? Minnesota Housing does. Here's a flyer and about how you access that, and here you go. And that might be all that they need to fix up their house. And goal accomplished for you all, and it didn't cost you anything other than directing people in the right place. So, like I said, I wanted to focus more on the discussion questions. That's all the background. I'm certainly happy to talk more about that if you'd like to, but I know what we really wanted to focus on is these, I've got 4 just basic questions, and, you know, your feedback obviously is would be very much appreciated here, and that we'll aggregate that, you know, and we'll use that as we start fleshing out what a strategy might look like. So the first one is just very, very simple. These are all very simple, but what is it that you all view are the most urgent needs and or issues in Burnsville as it relates to housing?
I'll comment on a couple of things. One is, in our previous conversations, it was noted that Burnsville's the best kept secret. I'm talking about the South Metro. If we compare it to other places, we have a lot more parks, we have a lot more amenities, we have a wide range of type of homes, from lower cost rental to high-end, a bunch of them on lakes. So the general impression I get from people outside of Burnsville is it's a tired, blue-collar neighborhood, which it's not. It's a vibrant, multi-generational, great city. So I'm not sure why that's the case, but I'm just kind of like, that's interesting perspective. And I'm not sure, some of that data you showed doesn't even substantiate that. You know, the housing value is not dramatically less than Egan and Rosemont. And there's newer developments in Lakeville and things like that, which of course push up their numbers. But that would be one thing that I would put out there.
So that, and we talked a little bit about that back in 18, is more the image not matching the reality. Is that kind of how you're, yeah.
The second thing would be this awareness, like those grants. I go, I've never heard of these grants. I mean, if there's, most people might know there's loans, which most people are, you know, they're happy to take a loan, but if there's grant money, boy, we should be aware of that and be communicating it. And I mean, I have no idea how deep and long these resources are, so that'd be just helpful to know. And education as key leaders.
Sure.
Just a little anecdote, but it might say why, of your first point of, you know, best kept secret. There's a couple that moved into our neighborhood, they don't have any kids. They said, well, we bought, you know, I asked why they bought in, you know, where they did, and they said, well, we looked in Egan, and for the same house we're getting here, it's, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 less because it's in Burnsville and the school district is not thought of as well as other school districts. And, you know, it kind of, I hadn't even thought of that difference in pricing, but it's really related to the school district and what people think of it. Not necessarily that the school district is bad, but they don't look at it as highly as other school districts around Burnsville. And it doesn't help that you got some shopping centers that are, when you come into Burnsville on the east side there, that are, look like they're falling down, you know, that could cause our image, whether it's housing or not, you know, to be not the greatest.
Right, and we did talk about that too, and that, just so you know, that this community is not the only one that experiences that sort of disparity when it comes to different school districts. And it's just sometimes a matter of perception, and so there's an opportunity there, right, to do some education. I think there was a, back here you had.
Yes, thank you for recognizing me. I think that the feedback that I hear is that there's a distance from the either twin city. I don't think it's a long distance, but the majority of the feedback that I hear is it's a distance. It's quite a distance to get to Burnsville. And I think the other information that I would receive is for the millennials, the housing, they're looking for like new build type housing. And Burnsville doesn't well, I shouldn't say we don't offer that because we do have some new builds here, but the majority of our homes they're older and less appealing to the millennial. So,
Do you think, just to kind of build on that a little bit, is that primarily a function of new builds for single-family housing, or is it new builds for rental housing, or is it both, or how do you kind of?
you know what? That's a good question. I would think that it would probably encompass both, right? Because you're going to have the millennials are not ready to buy, and then you're going to have the ones that are ready to buy. So I would think that that would encompass both.
And probably,
But definitely because they're looking for that new build. I think HGTV has really
Yeah.
just turned people on to this new look, and then you have to really want the type of housing that we have here in Burnsville.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
We have heard that before. I don't know if there was some study or something that came out a year or two ago that spoke to that millennials are kind of afraid of contractors and home remodeling stuff. As much as they see it, they want to buy it and they want it turnkey because they see the problems maybe that their parents or relatives went through dealing with contractors. Contractors kind of get a bad rap and they don't want to deal with it. They don't have the time, so they want something that's turnkey, brand new, ready to go. I think there have been studies on that in market analysis of what they're looking for, so for sure. And I'll just highlight while I have the microphone, goal number 2 in your ED strategic plan is to improve the image of School District 191 and the city, just as a reminder. So that is up there as well on the list.
So, can I interrupt? So I can take this question a couple different ways. One is the broader overall housing needs of the community. I know some people would mistake me for a millennial, but I'm not. But I will tell you that even at my age, when we were looking for homes, we didn't want a home that was a fixer-upper easy. It was just easier to buy a newer home that was in good shape. But I would say from a Burnsville standpoint, the most urgent housing needs are kind of, I think of it in terms of a standard deviation. And it's the outliers that are probably the most, in the micro context, are the most important that we need to address around this goal. And then also I would say that there's probably a desire to really cater to a lot of senior citizens as well that would like to age within their house and maybe don't have the capability to do that. I wish some retirees would step up with the Burnsville Angels and provide free labor if we provide a program that offers material costs or something to help a lot of these retirees in the city age within their home. But ultimately, it's the outliers that are deteriorating the neighborhood that, in my mind, in the micro sense, needs to be most addressed.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, because I'm not sure I fully understand. You mean that there are outliers in neighborhoods that are affecting neighborhood quality, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, a standard deviation, 80% fall under the bell curve, right? And then you have your outliers outside of that. And what I would say is those outliers that we probably need to address that are homes that are deteriorating and they're not being
From a maintenance standpoint.
from a maintenance
Yeah, okay.
standpoint,
I
and are
wanted to
not
make
being
sure.
kept up to code or kept up to neighborhood standards that ultimately I would like to see addressed on a micro level that we originally created this idea about.
Sure. And then with respect to the idea of housing choice, there was, I think you said a couple of things, but one thing I heard was potentially the development of new housing that can accommodate seniors, but the other thing you said was maybe something that helps people stay within their homes as they age in place. Or did you mean both or just one of those things?
No, I really was talking about, based upon our existing housing, being a fully built-out community,
Yep.
being able to come up with a program that also allows those who would prefer to age in place, but at the same time don't have the means to maybe keep the house up or make the changes that need to be made, for instance, a first floor bedroom, that allows some of that to happen as well.
Laura had a question online there. Go ahead, Laura.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to speak a little bit to some needs that I am observing in the area. One of the things that really stands out to me is that there are a lot of areas, given the age of Burnsville, a lot of people are still in their homes a lot later in life. We're seeing that in the slowing down in our school district. That's because many people who still own their homes in Burnsville and love their homes in Burnsville haven't left, letting younger families in who would utilize the school district. So I think it's important to pay attention to the age of our residents and to take a look at where we've got little pockets of that, where we've got an older owner resident, and making sure that we speak to, again, helping them maintain their property, improve their property, update their property. And that means that when they do decide to sell and leave that property, and it does go to a younger family, in all likelihood, it is turnkey. It isn't new construction. It maybe has all the features of our more uniquely mid-century modern homes, which is more of the era that a lot of these homes were built. But those are incredibly popular too, as long as they're well maintained. And they certainly have a lot more interesting architectural features, which, as a millennial, I'll say all of my friends really enjoy.
Chris, I think you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, more just a statement as to, so I've been talking to a lot of people in Burnsville lately over the last few months. Actually ran into Laura just the other day. So one issue we're having is that I see, that I've been hearing a lot about, is that we don't have amenities that seem to attract people around mid-40s on down. Things such as breweries, food truck events, communal activities. And a lot of the look of Burnsville, the perception is it's homogenized and seems to have stalled in its progress around the mid-90s. There's a lot of strip malls that look dated. And there's just not a lot to do within the city for people of the Gen X generation and the millennial generation. It's just something to consider when we're talking about trying to entice new buyers, new homeowners, younger homeowners who are going to be there for a long time. Some neighborhoods like Bloomington, St. Paul, you see older homes and you see young people who are very motivated to get in and redesign, rebuild those older homes and turn the whole neighborhoods into an updated neighborhood all on their own. I think they're out there. I just think it's getting attraction points to get people to say there's a lot to do in Burnsville. There's a lot of reasons to live here, and it's a city within itself. You don't have to venture out to get these activities that you want to partake in.
That's great feedback. Chair, do you have any other comments?
Nope. I think we're good to go. If you want to move on to.
No, thanks. I appreciate it. That's great feedback. I'm just going to jump to the next question. You know, if, at the end of the day, we put a housing strategy in place, what kind of outcomes would you like to see? What things would you like to see happen as a result of this?
I'm not shy, so I'll jump in on that
Go
one
ahead, Jack.
if nobody else is going to. So number one, I'd like to see funds that embrace a multiplier effect so that as we invest, those relate in a good return on that investment, whether it's in form of higher property taxes or maybe a low interest that we then can take those funds and reapply them to others. So I'd like to see a program that doesn't necessarily have a sunset, but the multiplier effect is alive and well. Second of all, I'd like to see a program where we're seeing houses being updated. Simply our housing stock with the community, really a lot of it being started in the 60s and so forth, is simply getting older. And there's no reason why we can't continue to have great homes in our community that are older homes, but we do need to reinvest in them. And so it would be great to have a lot of those homes reinvested in. And some of them may have a higher and better use. It simply means it's time to tear them down and build something new, whether that's an upscale twin home for senior citizens or whatever it might be. But for those that still make a lot of sense as the highest and best use of a single-family home, homes that are keeping up with the times and that are modern, even though the shell of the home is an older home.
Chris, I think you had a comment there.
Yeah, I'd like to see. I'd like to go back to the talks about the marketing of we have grants available that, again, I didn't know about them either. until looking at these notes. And I'd like to see an aggressive marketing campaign towards how we're able to help people who want to invest in their homes, bring their homes up to date, make new houses, or people who want to move into an area that says, hey, this, if you're industrious and you want to buy a home, renovate it, this city will help you. That would encourage people to move in here, and also why you want to move to Burnsville. Again, we have a lot of great things in Burnsville. We just don't have a great way of letting our residents or the surrounding communities know why you'd want to come to Burnsville and spend your time and your money. I think if we make the city just appeal more attractive through an aggressive marketing campaign, we could really change a lot of the image, which in turn would fix a lot of our problems.
Laura, looks like you had a comment as well.
Yeah, I just want to echo sort of an effort to attract young professionals and young families. I think when you fill up that school district, all of those struggles start to turn the tide a bit as much as they can, and young professionals in to either build toward the entrepreneurial undercurrents of our city or to be spending their beautiful economic dollars in our city as well. So those would be really highlights for me of where I think we could target best to help our city flourish.
I have a question. Did we do a study, or was there a study of any sort that was done that can kind of help us understand where are the millennials moving, and what types of things that they're interested in? Because when I think about feedback that I've heard, especially from millennials, they want an opportunity to be able to enjoy themselves outside of the home, as well as have a decent place to live. So, for example, I'm not sure if I know the area very well, but I want to say Edina has some things that are happening where the young people can get out, they can enjoy the neighborhood and do some things, but be able to go back to a nice home. And some of those homes don't look like just single-family homes. They might look more like condominiums, or spaces where they don't necessarily have to cut grass or shovel snow. I understand that that's not something that millennials are turned on by either. So, in the best world, if I were to think about what would be the best opportunity for residents, I would be thinking about something that embraces not only the millennial or the younger generation, but what would also embrace the older generation. So how can they cohabitate together and still have everything they need? For example, that could look like housing that is able to serve a young family, but yet and still maybe mom and dad might need the assistance, or maybe mom's alone now because dad's not here and she just needs the support, or a family member or somebody needs the support. So I think that's turning into another type style of housing. I know that at one point St. Paul was interested in building on housing to kind of fill that gap, to fill that need, to help the older generation still be able to live independently, but yet jointly where they had the support. So maybe something along those lines.
Yeah, just carry on to that, and I think, well, it's good to focus on millennials as well. We should be focusing on, like you said, the seniors and aging, big population there. I know we're doing a lot of new buildings that came on the market with our senior living centers surrounding Burnsville, and kind of maintaining both them as well, and even people that want to move out of bigger cities in the downtown areas and want to move into more of the suburb area and kind of resort here. As we know, we have all the amenities of parks and lakes and walking paths and everything within our city limits that kind of encompasses, you put multiple cities together, and that's a city of Burnsville. Right, Al?
I think the other piece that I would look at is that parts of our city don't have real good internet access. Any place that's not served by Comcast or, you know, what's our phone company, CenturyLink, you know, the reliability of their internet is not very good, as witnessed by the Public Utilities Commission for the state finding the Frontier and other companies that have, you know, they've contracted to supply a certain amount of internet access, but they failed in the speed and things like that. I think the other piece is that if we do promote the availability of funds, making sure we have enough funds available, because I could see Burnsville, it's like you were saying, the housing stock really needs to be updated. And if all of a sudden you do enough marketing that you run out of funds, that's not very good either. So making sure that the funds that are available, I mean, you look at the CARES grant, there were, what, $3.5 million requested, and the council only allocated like $1.5 million or something like that. So it's like, okay, there was a promise, but you can't deliver all of the promise. And I know it wasn't promised that everybody could get something, but still it's, you know, putting something out there and then you can't deliver what it is. That would be the other piece that I would look at.
It's great. I'll keep us moving along here. So the third one starts getting at the question of what role the city should play in shaping housing in the city. And so what I've asked here is, you know, what are your thoughts about how the city should get involved with housing in Burnsville? You know, what degree of involvement, you know, on a kind of a scale? What do you think is the most appropriate role for the city as it relates to getting involved in housing in the city?
I think we've kind of been tapping on it a lot tonight. So as a homeowner here in Burnsville, and especially when I first moved into Burnsville back in 2006, and I bought an older home. I bought a 1966 home. Some of the things that concerned us was, okay, your furnace is going to be outdated. Our air conditioning was definitely outdated. The old air handler, where we actually were considering having to have somebody open up our ceiling just to get that out of there. I think providing the resources for homeowners to take the initiative to reinvest in their homes is critical. Whether that could look like a small loan with small interest to pay it back, or maybe it's not paid back in some capacities, just so people can have the opportunity to really feel like their property is worthwhile. And making sure that we're bringing the pride back to the city, right? Because if our residents don't have that, then the city won't have that collectively. So I think making some opportunities for residents to be able to reinvest in their houses would be a great start. We've talked about the solar panels on the homes before, but I've never really heard of the programs that actually do that. It was not anything that was widely shared so that I could take advantage of something like that. And maybe there are some opportunities where the homes can be updated in a way that people find them more desirable, like the newer homes. I mean, we're right next door to Lakeville. What's pulling people to Lakeville with all these new builds? What is that? Because a house is a house, right? But what are the bells and whistles that are pulling new residents in that direction? So I think reinvesting, finding some grants, some money, maybe that's resources that are here in the city. Maybe that's businesses that are here in the city that provides the resources for individuals to, make their homes more worthwhile. That's what comes to mind when you ask that question for me.
That's great.
I think the other thing from my perspective is, someone talked about it earlier, having to deal with contractors. You know, could the city, I know you can't recommend any individual one, but can you certify contractors? Are there some ways that you could say, here's a list of certified contractors, and the contractor has to go through and perform and show the work they've done, proven they're a good, contractor? That'll cost some money, but it's not any funds where you have to put money into a house or anything like that. It's just basically certifying somebody so that people could say, okay, if I go to these people, the city has at least some sort of, investigated these people some way. Even when you go to like the Better Business Bureau's website, you could look somebody up, but almost everybody has A+ unless they're really bad.
Yeah, some kind of incentives, say, for example, like even with electric panel boxes, right? Sometimes you have to upgrade those, what, 220? I'm looking more towards the fellas, because I know you guys know that more than I do. But
220,
upgrade,
221, whatever it takes.
yeah.
Whichever is faster.
So like some kind of incentive to do that type of thing, or even with the plumbing, sometimes with these homes, the plumbing is, the pipes are really small, and just listening to the millennials, I would be afraid of that even as an older resident, to kind of go and have to repair some of that. But if there are incentives for that work to be done, maybe the product is sold at a lesser rate, or maybe if you purchase that product, then here's a certificate where you can have that work done. Just some things to help people want to reinvest in the housing.
Yeah, it could be even simple as partnering with CenterPoint Energy or Energy Consortium and doing home energy audits, and maybe it's a small credit back to, partner with them, and it gives the homeowner a little flexibility to, update their homes and save a little money on their utility bills, and giving back to that, or, kind of making, we have all said it here today, but making awareness to all the grant programs. And as a owner of a older house myself, when we purchased this, I've done a lot of renovating ourselves, and you gotta pick and choose what you needed to replace first. Was it the windows? Was it the furnace? Was it the bathroom floor or whatnot? And knowing that these grant programs are out there, and to be able to take utilization of it, or even having awareness of looking into them, could have helped sway some decisions one way or another. But yeah, I think it's just creating awareness to kind of these programs out there. Even I think in our background presentation, there was mention of like Coon Rapids, and they created their own programs, like deferred loan program, or like a fix-up loan program. Could be even something like that, where we kind of branch out of existing grant programs from the Dakota County or statewide, and kind of could build one of our own programs and partner with some kind of a funding agency to help out with that. I think Jeff, you had a comment.
So I concur with a lot of that. My answer to that, the short answer would be as little as possible. At a minimum, I think it means that the city has responsibility to define the programs and vet those programs and promote those programs. On top of that, or in addition to that, I'd say then the city has additional responsibility to make sure they're a success. If we could partner with somebody that administers the process of all of that, and that would be terrific, and not put the city in that business. If we can't find that person, the city, in order for it to be a success, may need to get involved. But my short answer is for the city to be involved as little as possible.
And I'll go to Laura. Laura had a comment.
So I think the city does have a role that's important to incentivize opportunities that express their values. So if we say that Burnsville is a vibrant city and boldly leading and welcoming to all, the choices should reflect that. One of my favorite experiences as a Burnsville resident was a couple of years ago when I was putting in a rain garden, and I went to the Dakota County Water and Land seminars to do their program to put in a rain garden. And when they went through the different cities and what opportunities they had for grants and additional funding for that, Burnsville stood out head and shoulders above the rest. Other cities might offer $50 of a rebate or a refund, or $100. Burnsville was offering $1,000 to incentivize putting in these environmentally friendly rain gardens. And when we can make our choices reflect our values like that, when we show we are boldly leading on economic or on environmental issues like water, then we shine. So those might be energy efficiency, updating mechanicals. I loved the program discussed about down payment assistance that encourages or enables young families and professionals to move to the city. Maybe a program for architectural enhancements that incentivizes improvements that enhance the beauty of the mid-century homes that we have, as opposed to trying to hide it and pretend that it's not an older home. They're full of interesting character, or enhancing the exterior landscaping that makes all of our communities look their best. So in summary, just making sure our choices in programs reflect those sorts of values that we've set forth.
Go ahead, Chris.
One thing I've come across is, and this is just hearsay, but a lot of the people who I've ran into who are doing remodels to their homes, they're enthusiastic and they're really into their projects, but when they go to apply for permits to the city, they present their proposal, the city approves it, they go over whatever they need to go to until they get the approval. After the fact, they run into other problems where things weren't clear. For an example, I ran into a guy who wanted to do hot roofing. He got approval from the city for his project, and then afterwards the contractor said, this isn't legal in Burnsville. There's only 2 cities in Minnesota that this isn't legal in, and one of them is Burnsville. So he goes and inquires about this. They say, yeah, you can't hot roof. The city engineer does get back to him after a few days and says, you can't hot roof. He inquires why. They never get back to him. He inquires with the contractor. The contractor says reasons he's gotten before. Long story short, that's one example. There's other examples too of people putting decks and additions to their houses and stuff like that. And it's just frustrating. It sounds like it's just frustrating right now to work with the city. You get approval for something, and then they retract that approval later on, or they say that the city inspectors come by and they say, this is a violation, you need to fix this, you need to fix that. Where was that in the beginning is what the homeowner will ask. What I think we need to do is have a better upfront portfolio packet ready for people who want to do remodel projects, and really be ready to help people who want to do remodel projects instead of being the reason for their frustration. That's what seems to be happening a lot. And if we have these older homes and we want people to move in and redesign them and revitalize them, we need to be a city that is known for working with their residents and being really easy to work with. And if that means removing restrictions, lifting permits, or providing grant money, these packets could come inclusively with, hey, if you're doing this, this is also how you can get some of this funded too.
That's great. I'm gonna jump ahead, and this is more cutting to the chase, and you all have, I think, answered this at least to some extent already, but, it's about using city funds. I mean, do you think that there is an interest in using actual city funds and staff to enhance programs or create new ones? And I think I heard yes in a lot of quarters there. I know, Jeff, you said as little as possible. I don't take that as a no necessarily, but more that you're leveraging other things. I don't know, but I'd like to hear a little more about the thoughts on using actual city dollars to put into some of these programs.
I'll jump in first. I think my comment would be just as it makes sense. I think I don't want to be tapping into more property tax increases or increasing the tax levy to create a program that may not be utilized or anything. But I mean, if there's enough enough influence, not influence, but enough affirmation for it, or people are, really wanting a certain program, I think, the city should certainly look into it and maybe divert funds from one city fund to the next first before they start looking in increasing property taxes or increasing the tax roll. Go down.
Maybe there's a way to create some sort of tax increment financing for residential housing, where, if somebody goes and buys a house that's really run down and it's only worth $150,000, well, the tax on that's only so much. But if they, completely redo it and the value goes up to $350,000, can they get some of that tax money back like a business would and with tax increment financing? Can that be what supports a program to help people? Just the increase in their tax, not everybody's tax, but their tax.
So when I said as little as possible, I didn't necessarily talk about or think about funds. I was thinking more about process and administrative support. On the fund side, I would say that once we've explored the grants that are out there that may be available to the city, and let's hypothetically say that they come to $500,000, but we determine as a city to be effective and make this program successful, we need $1.5 million, then I think the city's gonna have to take a good hard look at that and say, okay, do we cover that gap? And then how do we cover that gap? I think part of the easy answer for me is, and this whole conversation was not only originally centered on homes, it was also centered on a lot of the older commercial buildings in the city as well. And for me, the easy thing to suggest is that if on the city-owned land, when they sell a commercial property, that money becomes available to the commercial industrial upgrades. If we have residential lots through tax forfeiture or through the city-owned that we sell, those funds then become available for residential development. So to me, that's maybe an easy thing. Again, I don't know at the end of the day how the math works on that. The reality is that in order to be successful, we have to have the funds available to make it successful, right?
I know.
Thanks for that clarification. I made a note that we're talking about staffing and admin on the little as possible side, which I think makes sense, so.
I know what Regina's gonna talk about later with the land that's down in the South Burnsville. I mean, if they build 9 houses on there, that's a lot of, in addition to the, the money we get from selling the land, that's a lot of taxes we're gonna get that we're not seeing at all right now. And something like that, to me, could be part of the equation too.
Chris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I liked what the Coon Rapids has done with their Home for Generations 2 program and offering permit rebates. It's not the worst idea in the world. And I do like that they offer a low interest loan of up to $50,000, which also generates income for the city too when you get to collect that interest money. And then it shows people again that you're willing to help them as much as you can in revitalizing their homes or their businesses that they bought.
Great. The feedback on that? All right, I'll go ahead and jump ahead then. Okay, so, I mean, this is great. You guys are always terrific as far as providing feedback, so that makes our lives a little easier. In terms of next steps, I mean, our thought was that, this is an initial discussion, and we've gotten a long ways, and I appreciate that, but I think we'd like to aggregate some of this feedback and start looking at what priorities make the most sense. The city already does an awful lot, whether everybody knows it or not, right? You have a lot of things that you're doing that are on par with what a lot of other great cities are doing with respect to housing. And so I think it's a function of evaluating how the existing programs match up to where we want to see priorities go into the future, and then start thinking about how we tweak that or, either eliminate or improve certain programs. But I think that's staff work, right? I mean, I think that's for the staff to go back and answer these questions for you and give you some things to think about with respect to how programs may change within the city of Burnsville, and have a conversation about those, bring some of those back for consideration with the final goal ultimately of being to prepare sort of this final housing strategy that will become, you know, the guiding document, I guess, for the staff as they move forward with housing in the city of Burnsville. So that's kind of what our thoughts were. Are there other sort of closing or final things that anybody did get a chance to talk about that we want to make sure we're getting into the thought process here?
I just have a question for the EDC.
Here, go ahead, Jenny.
The goal does include commercial programs, and a couple of you have brought that up. So do you have similar ideals and tendencies towards the commercial programs as we do the housing, as far as use of funds, use of city resources? Just as we craft this to cover both bases, want to make sure we know where you're at with those.
Thank you.
So that's how we originally had talked about it, and we had the same need and the same conversation on the industrial, or on the commercial and industrial side with the agent of some of those properties. At the end of the day, we can only do so much, and we can only do it so fast. And so if it makes the most sense to start small, which it usually does, and work out the kinks and have a really well-defined process and then expand it from there, where a year from now, we're having the conversation about extending into commercial industrial properties, then I'm all for that. At the end of the day, we all want it to be a success, and we can't take on too much too fast. And so I kind of throw that back at staff a little bit, saying what is realistic to take on at this time.
I have, so I've been watching nationwide, really. What are we gonna do with all these buildings now that everything has changed since COVID-19? I think our reality that we're living and that we're seeing is a lot of these buildings that housed people to do work, even to sell goods, right? That's not gonna look the same after all the dust settles, I think, after COVID-19. Now that they've learned that people can actually work from home and they don't have to go to a facility to actually get a job done, I shudder to think what is it gonna look like with all these empty buildings all around, right? There's conversation that we're having at work right now. We're not gonna send employees back to buildings. So how do we downsize these buildings, and which ones do we actually need? And I think that's gonna actually be the reality that we have here in Burnsville. What are we gonna do with all these empty buildings, and how can we reinvent what we do with these empty buildings? Because I don't think that being able to sell them, to get business to come in and to offer goods and services the way that it looked yesteryear is going to look the same moving forward. So, and I'm basically just having a conversation out loud, because these are thoughts that have been going through my mind as I've been watching all of this, the transition since COVID-19. But I think that's gonna be a reality we deal with as a city. We're gonna have empty buildings, and what are we going to do with those? And how are we going to make the city attractive? Because everyone knows if you leave them vacant and empty, they attract rodents and a lot of other things. So we're actually seeing some activity even now, right? Uptick, because people are not working the same way that they used to. So I think while it's interesting to answer this question, we have to kind of focus on what's to come with how we treat buildings and the use of them. What is that really going to look like? I don't think anyone has an answer right now, but I think we can all imagine that it's probably going to look dramatically different than we anticipated maybe 6 or 7 months ago. So if we want to be thoughtful moving forward, kind of considering that, what that's going to look like, it's going to be imperative, I think.
Go ahead, Al.
I think your point about commercial and industrial is a good point, but at this point in time, I think you've got people out there who are willing to work forward and come up with proposals to use the resources that the city has versus the housing stock itself. I don't think people have that same thought process that, you know, if they want to redevelop something, they can come to the city, they can work with the city. that type of thing, that really has to be set, I think, first. And then we get, you know, to Crystal's point, in another year or two, we'll know what the industrial buildings are needed for. And my guess is there's gonna be a need. It's gonna be different than what it is now.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for me.
All right, any last questions, comments from the commission before we move on? This was just discussion purposes only, so there's no motion on this one, so if there's nothing else, we can move on. We're closing out item 4, moving on to agenda item number 5, recommendation related to Southcross Drive and Portland Avenue land sale. And I'll shift it over to Regina to give an overview and background of this.
Good evening, Chair, members of the commission. So before you tonight, we have a proposed land sale. It is city-owned land opposed to Economic Development Authority land. I just wanted to make that distinction. Just for background, the property was acquired by the city in the late 90s, and it was acquired for the purpose of landing a fire station in this location. And that plan never moved forward. We continued to retain the land, and in the 2000s, the city went out for RFP to develop the site. So the intent was to develop the property, and we actually entered into a purchase agreement to develop land into 6 lots. Because of the timing of that, it just kind of fizzled out. The market was basically, we're heading to recession at that time, and it never moved forward. So after that happened, there were a couple of attempts for it to move forward, fizzled out, and then the city's position was, well, let's retain it because we might want it for a fire station again someday. So just held on to it for years, and then with the recent Fire Station 1 expansion and relocation to a different site, after much analysis, it was determined that we would not need this site anymore and that it could become for sale again. So a sign was posted on the land back in late 2019. We had multiple inquiries, phone calls, emails, people asking, what's the price? How do I purchase this? So because we were unsure if these were legitimate questions, legitimate offers, we decided to request a letter of interest, and we received, I think there were 8 letters of interest that we received, 6 to 8 letters of interest. We have a policy, and that was included in your packet, that talks about land sales. So when you have one or more party interested in a property, we require an RFP process. So because we received that number of letter of interest, we then went through the RFP process. So we received 4 proposals at the end of the process from Brandel Anderson, Donne Homes, Ryan Contracting, and Timeless Homes. And the purchase prices ranged from $138,000 to $585,000. I do want to note with Donne Homes, their purchase price for actually all of the properties except for Donne Homes were for 6 lots. Donne Homes is proposing to do 9 lots. However, in their RFP, they stated that there would be a reduction if they were unable to attain 9 lots after doing detailed plans and working with the city, that there would be a reduction in price. So we did reach out to Allers. Jason was kind enough to provide us with the memo. The full memo is in your background, which details the reduction in Donne Homes from 9 units to 6 units and what the purchase price could look like. And then what the tax value would be for the city based off of all the proposals. Donne Homes' proposal, again, includes 9 lots. They were all single-family in character, reduced lot lines with private roads. In the end, we met internally as a staff, evaluated the memo that was received from Allers, evaluated our planner and engineer, and Jenny were on the review team, based off of the land use, which is low density, the zoning, which is R2, the purchase price, the product type, and the history that Donna Homes has in Burnsville and the Twin Cities. We are recommending Donna Homes for the land sale. And this is just an example of the product type. All of the proposals included a single-family reduced lot line type of product.
And that's what surrounds it, correct? It's the same type of they're single-family homes, but they're smaller lots and association-based.
Commissioner Anderson, correct. So it's very similar to, I think it's the Wildwood development, which has reduction in lot size and reduction in setbacks for the area. So it would almost mirror what's just to the north. So not only are we asking for a recommendation from the Economic Development Commission on the specific land sale and selection of the proposal or the developer, but we're also asking you to consider where the funds could potentially go. And this is a recommendation, ultimately, it's the City Council's decision. But knowing what you know from our discussion on the previous item, one of the things we would like to know is if you would like to recommend that maybe a new program be funded, maybe related to residential. And we can explore that a little more if that's your recommendation, what those details look like, if that actually happens. But we want to get some feedback from the commission on that. Typically, the proceeds of a city-owned land sale would go straight to the general fund or a capital fund. Now, sometimes if it's related to TIF, it would go to the TIF district, or if it's the EDA, it would go to an EDA budget. But this specific land sale will go to the general fund or capital improvement fund. So if you have a desire and perhaps want it redirected to one of these programs, we would love to hear that discussion and recommendation. It looks like Commissioner Cleveter has a question.
First, are there any commercial investors looking to buy that property?
Do you mean to build
All right.
a commercial project or like a bit?
Let me just save everyone some time and cut to the chase. Are there anyone proposing to build a bar in that area? Because that's like a block away from my house.
We did not receive any bar, restaurant, gas station, fast food type of cool brewery type of proposals on that property. No.
All right. Well, on to my next point then. So one thing that we have in this city that is a problem is we're grossly understaffed in our fire service. We're understaffed by 22 people by NFPA recommendations. If we're getting this, what I looked at the numbers, I believe it was $40,000 potentially a year from as high as $40,000 a year from the sale of this property and investment into it, correct?
I think you might be talking about the property tax.
Yep.
Yep.
Future project.
What we stand to
Future
gain
property
off
tax increase.
development of this area.
I think it was somewhere around there. I don't know I guess we can't flip back to that page.
So
So I'd like,
Yeah, it was about, city portion was what, 17?
so it'd be nice to see that this money get allocated. This is a serious issue. I mean, we're running 2 ambulances for 12 hours a day. That's 1 car accident away from wiping out our ambulance services and making us rely on mutual aid. We need more fire staffing. I'd like to see not only this money, but other money get earmarked going forward towards fixing that problem before it becomes a real issue. It's a life safety concern.
Any more of the presentation? Otherwise,
okay, yes.
So how much is the sale for, and what's the estimated tax revenues?
So if Dawn A. Holmes is selected and they are able to build the 9 lots, the purchase price would be $585,000. And then the city property tax, and Jason, maybe you can help me clarify the numbers on the property tax.
So the orange or pink color there is tax capacity. And, you know, when we had the discussion about the strategic plan, there was a desire on the part of council members to represent these new market values as an expression of tax capacity, because obviously you have to decide to levy against that tax capacity to raise those taxes. So it probably is a little confusing, but what each of these generate in new tax capacity is showing there. We have a range of, on the Ryan, just because of the range of values. But what that would translate into from a property tax standpoint with today's tax rates is what's showing what the city would raise in taxes at current tax rates on the far right.
How much is that?
So for which one?
Range.
The
It'll be
proposed. to Donnelly,
17.
Adani is $17,475.
a year.
Correct.
How many houses are there?
There are 9,
Okay,
yeah. And, you know, with an average tax bill, I mean, total is probably, you know, almost $4,000 at those values.
got it. Okay, thanks.
So,
So-
I'm sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Krista.
I was gonna, what runs through my mind is, okay, they purchase these lots, they build on them, single-family homes, which is a plus, right? We've been just talking about how do we draw younger people to our community. Here's just one idea. But then how do we reinvest? So we get those families here, but there's other things that keep those families from desiring to want to be here, stay here. So why, if we reinvest that money into, this gets to your point with what to do with buildings. If we reinvest that money into something that is attractive to the young families, then whatever we get coming from what they do activity-wise goes back to the city, right? We can tax something to go back to the city. My whole point is, this is my idea, is you're selling these homes, you're probably gonna draw younger families to buy these homes. Then what are you gonna do to attract them to stay? What can we do to attract them to stay? Reinvest in our community in ways that keeps the younger generation here or younger families here. But when they spend money to leave their homes to go and enjoy activities, so for example, I'm just gonna be hypothetical, some kind of indoor amusement park of some sort. We would gain taxes from whatever it was that they were doing with that, right? So if we were able to gain taxes in some capacity that reinvests in our community, I'm trying to look at it a way of how do you solve one issue to solve another issue, but to still raise tax dollars or bring in tax dollars to the city so that we can keep growing. If that just made sense to everybody.
So it's all, in my mind, it's all intertwined. What Commissioner Chris has said is I don't want to minimize that because it is an important issue. But my recommendation would be that we take the funds and we build a new program exactly around what we're talking about tonight. The reason being is that it's $17,000 a year in taxes that we're not achieving today. Today it's city-owned property. There's no taxes being generated. Essentially in 20 years, almost 20 years, you recovered that $390,000. And that tax base that we're creating, some of the beneficiary of that will be the fire department. And so in my mind, if we give to the fire department one time, it's money that's not continuing to work for us. Where if we reinvest that money into these programs, at the same time creating a tax base, we're kind of addressing all at one time, even though it's over a period of time versus just immediately here in the next year.
Right.
So my thoughts would be very much to create a new program with those dollars that allows us to do some of the things we're talking about tonight.
And Chair, if I could just add to that. The spirit of the recommendation that we made in the memo was really kind of geared at what you just said, right? So the land sale proceeds are a one-time revenue, right?
Right.
So if you took them and tried to, fund city operations, you'd only be able to do it once, right? Or maybe a couple times if you spread it out over a couple years, and then you're kind of right back where you started from. So the reason for recommending the Don A. homes, obviously the sales price is the highest, so that's a good reason, right? But as important as the growth in tax base, this is an opportunity to get more tax base within your community, which is kind of, I think, what you're going with this.
Yes.
Which provides an opportunity for the city to levy without impacting taxpayers, right? So they could theoretically levy $17,000 more every year without impacting taxpayers. That's essentially what this is doing. And so to pay for fire, pay for whatever you want to pay for, right? As a city, you have to decide that through your budgeting process. But those were kind of the two things that we always view are as important, because that's a recurring sort of annuity to the city, right? That tax base is there all the time and can be used for that purpose. And so I just wanted to clarify, you're going where we were going with it, but that was the spirit of our recommendation, was to be looking at both of those aspects.
Yeah, and I would emphasize in terms of the allocation, the lump sum having been the seed capital for this new project, for these new programs. And I in the 17,000, I know that the city council is gonna have 10 other great ideas on how to redirect that. And it could be for the fire department, it could be all sorts of other things. But if we want to be serious about these new programs and the rejuvenization and the contemporization of our housing and industrial stock, this $500,000 is a nice start. The second thing is, I would encourage us to look at how to leverage that money via a loan, have it be a way to subsidize loans. For example, all right, as everyone knows, loans are really cheap right now, but even if you get a no interest loan. And so you go to the commercial bank, you say, okay, what can you give us? And the bank gives us a 2% loan. Great, we'll take the interest and we'll pay this. So now we not only have $500,000, you can leverage this to $5 million. I mean, because now you're servicing just the interest on a very large loan. And now you've got a real industrial, I mean, now you have a program that you won't burn through, because $500,000, frankly, is not enough to get a real program going. So that would be something I'd challenge the staff to think about, kind of break new ground, or have corporate partners or something like matching grants. That sort of thing. When I've served on boards on nonprofits, we're always constantly leveraging donations, and that's what the city could also do, have these intelligent conversations with other vested interest and say, hey, we're doing a matching grant. Big corporations, can you pitch in? Now we got some seed money, and we're gonna use this to add a whole new flavor, a whole new way of getting resources available. So those are a couple of my ideas for you.
And before we get into some more comments around here, I just want to let the commission know, and I think he's still available. I think we have Steve Benke from Don A. Homes Developer. If you have any questions for him, or if you want to have him field any questions, he's available as well.
Do we need a motion on that to approve that, what the staff is recommending, or not?
We will need a motion to recommend the sale to Don A. Homes for this one, but Steve is available for questions if we have any questions for him. And before I get
I
to
have
you,
a
Al, I
question.
think, yep, Laura had a question or comment. So Laura, go ahead.
First of all, I'm wondering, has anybody checked back? I mean, obviously, it's great to have a representative from Don A. Homes, but has anybody checked back? These dates, they were submitted before coronavirus hit. So are these suggestions and proposals still valid? Are they still interested in these projects? Second of all, I have some questions that Steve maybe can answer specifically. I'm curious if you can discuss what it is that's setting the Ryan Contracting bid apart from yours, where they've got houses in a little bit higher range. What is it about those homes? I didn't get so deep in it that I gleaned exactly what was going on that put them in a little different price range for some of the homes that they're proposing versus the ones that you have suggested and plotted. And why are you the only one who thought that 9 houses was gonna fit? Is there some logic there where everybody else was seeing 6 lots and you see 9 possible? How realistic is it to get all 9? And finally, for the city, I'm curious, do we need houses in the $450,000 range? Do we need more houses in the 700,000 range? How will these meet sort of the needs or the gaps in our housing market right now? Lots of questions.
So, Chair, if I may answer the question regarding the 4 different proposals we received, and if there's still interest from all of them. Yes, they, throughout the entire process, they were kept informed, and they were all interested till the day that I had mentioned that staff would be recommending Donna Holmes. They are all aware of this meeting as well tonight. As far as some of the other questions, maybe they can be best directed, to Steve with Donna Holmes.
Yeah, Steve, if you want to chime in here on some of the questions that Laura had.
Sure. I'm not sure. Can anybody hear me?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, occasionally I have technical issues here. I want to thank the commission for the time here. Honestly, as to Laura's questions, and I didn't write them down, so I'm sort of going to just sort of touch on the ones that I remember here, and you can fill in any I forget. But I think my biggest thing is I have a significant history in the city here, and I actually had done some work with Scott Larson, who developed the Wildflower property next door. I've been very interested in that parcel since the fire station was proposed, because it seemed to cut a corner out of what should have been a residential area. That sort of shows you how far back I go in the planning part of this. And what I noticed when I first saw the PUD was it really didn't address the adjacent properties. And there's multifamily to the west. There are single family across Southcross, but that's a significant arterial road. And what was immediately adjacent to it was a narrower lot single family project, which when I investigated it to refresh my memory, essentially was the same product that I had just completed a project in Woodbury. So it really spoke to things that we do well. And the other part of it is we were just coming to the end of our Summit Buck Hill project, where we built 99 units and worked our way through the recession. It took 14 years to build it out, but we stuck through it and got it done. I'm on the last 3 units right now. But essentially what I saw was a need to address today's planning concepts, where a little bit more density actually helps. You're not putting in so much that it changes the character of the neighborhood. We're matching the character of the neighborhood. We're trying to basically offer product that can do 2 things. One is, yes, it's definitely possible we're going to sell to younger families or people of that nature. I think the most of our product line that we're proposing here actually is going to be more of an empty nester type product. And what that does is it brings some of those people, yes, maybe only 9, but it brings some of those people out of the existing homes in Burnsville and frees them up for new families. This is one little piece where, we can get that going. And, maybe there's other land in Burnsville that we can do this with as well and add to it. But currently, this is a piece that came at us, that it was very, very attractive. And, we definitely felt that the site needed a little bit more than just the 6-lot, 85-foot wide product that was originally proposed. That's sort of where we're at with the project here. Honestly, we have single level villas, villa style, not really villas, because even as an association, that it's really more of a maintenance of the private drive of a, you know, probably garbage, but it's not that the whole project is handled like a townhome project or anything else. It's simply that we have some single level units, but as part of the product line that we've developed for Woodbury, we also have some 2-stories and some splits. And generally, any of the product that I built in Woodbury, the plans would just fit in here with virtually no change. So anyway, like I said, I just saw an opportunity where the piece as proposed back in the early 2000s was not really using the property to its highest advantage, and I think this does.
I'll ask Laura, or you might add any more comments to add on to Steve there.
One
Yeah.
question,
Hold on, Dan, one second.
Okay.
Go ahead, Laura.
Sorry. I would just hope that the city staff would take a look at what housing price ranges we really need to fill out our offerings here in Burnsville to make sure that the offerings suggested fit our needs. I don't really have any inside knowledge on that, so I don't claim to. But then I also wanted to circle back to the discussion right before Steve shared with us about what we might do to use any sort of potential revenues and advantages from the sale to help build the city's path for the future. And to me, when you're looking at being a draw for families and young professionals, it's straight in the school district. And if we could find any sort of a prestige education program that could get a really good PR footing and be something to draw attention to with regularity as a partnership with 191, if we were to use some funds for that, that high tide would lift a lot of boats along with it.
Dan, you wanna go?
well, I just had a question on the lot size, on how big is the lot size on these? You'd mentioned 65 feet or 85 feet?
Yeah,
They're not that big.
the adjacent project is actually 55-foot lots with 45-foot houses on it. So you basically have
Wow,
10 feet of setback, 5 on each side, and then you have 10 feet between the houses once they're up. I think one thing to keep in mind here is that because it's a small project in an odd-shaped lot,
yep,
the homes at the end of each side of the block actually have additional space. Now, some of that's going to end up being used for our water retention and our, you know, stormwater management, some of that kind of stuff. And we've got some grading because of the hill that goes uphill into Wildflower and those kinds of things. But, you know, generally they are a small lot single. They are not, you know, the big backyard. They're not more the typical ex-urban or suburban style home, which we actually have large numbers of in Burnsville. I mean, I grew up in one. I grew up in River Hills, and that, you know, that area was extremely, you know, well built, large lots, single family, you know, very good. Here we're much closer to, you know, Burnsville Center, which we all hope is going to be getting redone into a new character. I think that obviously the more that we can do to help that happen, it's going to help, you know, the entire city. But in the meantime, you know, I do feel that the units here are more of a lower maintenance type structure, and at our pricing, they are matching the Wildflower current pricing. I think that's something to keep in mind very clearly, that currently Wildflower homes immediately adjacent to this are typically in the $400 to $450 range. I don't think it's really appropriate to attempt to move into something that is significantly off that mark. I think that kind of a project would not really move very well personally. That's our opinion. That's why we propose this.
I totally agree. I think you want something that complements the local neighborhood when you're only dropping 9 houses in. It's gonna sound like it's a little more dense, and that's quite all right with me, so, thank you.
Well, there was a wildflower that just came on the market at $450 in the last couple of days. And I went through and looked at the lot sizes on wildflower, and they're less than, you know, what, 1/5 of an acre.
Yeah. They're-
So
it
this
has
is
more
very
of a town-
comparable to
It has more of
that.
a townhouse feel. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just put in my 2 cents here, and, yeah, when I was looking at the proposals and thinking of how can they put 9 houses on a complex in a neighborhood development like this when everyone else was proposing 6 lots, but once you start doing your research and looking at the adjacent properties and in the wildflower neighborhood, you start to realize that when they're going into this 9 houses, they're comparing to the wildflower development going into that 0.2 of an acre or 6,000 to 8,000 square feet per lot size, and looking at the proposed sales value is between, 450,000 median target range. You look in wildflower, and all the homes are ranging from 350,000 up to, like what Al was saying, is the highest one I saw was about 470,000 in that development, and I think you don't want to go stretch yourself too far outside that range, because then you kind of take away from the wildflower neighborhood development, changes the property in that area. If Woodbrook is more, if you want to call it more elite or higher home values, it'll either drop wildflower or there won't be any interest in the Woodbrook. And I think, for my recommendation, I think this is a great project for Dene Homes to take over. I like that they're trying to match kind of the surrounding areas with the wildflower neighborhood, and overall, I like the development and kind of the plan they've proposed for us tonight.
I think Chris might have had something.
Oh, Chris, did you have something?
Just to agree with you, I think that this, Donnie Homes, I trust that they have in their plan for the 9 homes. It looks like we get the best of both worlds. We get the $500,000, which I agree with what was said earlier, take that money and invest in the future. We get the $17,000, up to possibly up to $70,000 of a tax revenue base per year that's gonna be continual and there to help fund things like my proposal for the fire department or wherever it goes. That's gonna be a continual, income. So it looks like they have everything that you could want right here. I mean, good purchase price, good tax base coming out of it. Steve seems to have his ducks in a row. I mean, seems like a successful guy, so I don't think, he's an expert in that subject, so it looks like everything's great.
I may, one other reason why I thought the 9 lot would work is that this is what I do, taking things through city councils and things, so I had absolutely no qualms about, taking the proposal, going back through planning commission, going back through council, getting the comp plan updated if needed, all those things are part of what we do, so that part of it didn't bother me, and I do feel like, sticking with the 6 lots, it basically takes a project that was approved back in 2000-ish and doesn't really do anything new, and I think really Burnsville needs new.
You got something there?
I'll make a motion that we recommend to the city council that the city take the Dene Homes 9 lot offer.
I'll second it.
I was going to second, but.
Okay, we have a motion by Al, a second by LaFavor. I guess we go to Regina for a roll call.
Okay, just a moment. Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuplick,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFavor,
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveter,
Aye.
Commissioner Fitchett.
Aye.
And the motion carries.
Just one point of clarification that Commissioner Laura brought up on the school tax base. On property taxes, I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but a certain percentage, and it's a fairly high percentage, goes to the school district. So some of the property taxes goes to the city, some goes to the school district, and then the other portion goes to the county. You guys probably know the breakdown on that. I do not.
Off the top of my head, I do not. I mean, some goes to the watershed district. There's a whole breakdown on your
The
statement.
school district gets more than anybody.
Yeah, they get a big chunk of it. So they are indirectly benefiting to
Yeah.
that question.
23% or so. It's a big chunk.
Thank you, Commission.
All right, thanks, Steve, for
Thank you.
joining us and making questions available. Eric?
Can we also make a recommendation for the use of the funds?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I'd like to make a second motion that a separate fund be set up for any city-owned property sales to go into, and that would be designated at a later date for, projects within the city, but set up recommendation to set up a separate fund for these dollars to go into, to be used to better the city in a way that is determined in the future.
Now, is staff looking for a motion on where the funds are allocated to, or is it just more recommendations and comments back to?
I think it would be appropriate, a recommendation, that any city, based off of Commissioner Anderson's motion, any recommendation of city-owned land sales go to a residential or business program,
Development fund.
A new fund,
new fund related to residential and business programs.
right?
I think that's, to be formed criteria to be formed at a later date.
Yep. Sure. So we have a motion on the table, looking for a second
I'll
then.
second.
Got a second? We'll go to Regina for a roll call.
Just a second. Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuplick,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFaver,
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveter,
Aye.
Commissioner Fitchett.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, I think that concludes item number 5. Going to agenda item number 6, looking at the EDC legislative
Aye.
portion for discussion. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
I'll move it over to Jenny to provide an overview and background on this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regina's pulling up the brief PowerPoint. So you probably noticed, if you've been with us a while, that this legislative priority item is a lot shorter, I think, than ones in the past. So we made a significant change last year in how these are prioritized and the level of detail that was in our list. So it was really pared down. I just want to update you on which ones we have here that are related to economic development. So on the screen and in your packet, we have our priorities, and those are still, we had priorities before, and these are things that we advocate for and take action on and engage our legislative delegation on. First on the list, we have freeway landfill dump, and the city's position on that is that we would want legislation that protects the groundwater and the river through remediation, and we want a way that can support economic redevelopment that benefits not only the city but the region. And we support use of non-bonding state dollars for remediation. The reason why we have that in there is because it gives us the greatest flexibility for redevelopment. So, and if you've been tracking this for maybe the last year, the council's preference is for an alternative dig and haul option, which would allow for complete 100% redevelopment, and that's the city's position on that. So that's the priority. The current status of that with COVID, things really changed a lot at the legislature, and things that were on our list are still on our list, I will say, because so many things didn't get done and just kind of stopped midstream. The MPCA has informed us that this project has been delayed for 1 year. So they will be looking at going out to bid in 2021 to get dollar amounts for an alternative option, which is a hybrid model. So they sought public comments on this, and the hybrid model has, there was one where it was really flat, one where it was really tall, most amount of developable land, no amount of developable land, and the hybrid model is the one in the middle, if you were tracking that. And so that's the one that they will be recommending and going to get bids for, in addition to an alternate bid, which is for dig and haul. So that is still on the table, but that bidding process was supposed to happen this year. It's been delayed a year, and then they expect to ask for bonding funds once they know how much Plan A and Plan B costs in 2022. So that's the status of that one. The other priority that we have related to economic development has to do with Center Village. Regina and I and our lobbyists and city manager have been trying to get some special legislation that would declare the Burnsville Center make it a redevelopment district. It's been maintained, and so it's not in bad shape to meet the criteria, but we want it to be considered substandard for purposes of being able to create this type of TIF district. So we were making some inroads, I believe, with some key legislators when the session started, and things stopped, and they still remain stopped. And we'll see where things happen. This is still on our radar. We still need this designation for us to have TIF as a tool, which is our best tool to help fund the public infrastructure that's needed for the plan. But that's where we sit with that. Certainly, the retail environment has changed. We talked about some empty buildings and what that means. I mean, this really could be a case study for other properties around the state, and that's kind of what our story is to the legislature. We're not alone in this. There are other cities that are gonna have this, and let us be the test pilot for this. So that's what's happening there.
Can I make a
We'll
side,
take some pictures of the mall and show them.
I've invited them out.
It certainly
Come on
looks
out,
that.
Senator, yes.
can I make a side remark on that? This is getting away from the legislative agendas, but the owner defaulting on their tax mortgage payments, does that have any impact on like the TIF district or going after being certified for a TIF area?
No, it has to do with the amount of building inadequacies under the building code. So how deficient is the building, how substandard is the building by the standard of the building code? That's the legal analysis that has to be made, so. And then there are supporting positions, and we have a few here related to economic development. First and foremost is local control. Burnsville's a big advocate for local control, and there are things that pop up from time to time that the legislature wants to take that local control away from cities. And specifically, we continue to strongly advocate and support local control when it comes to land use, when it comes to flexibility with different tools like local option sales tax, franchise fees, et cetera. Our council believes those should be left up to city councils to decide, not the state. And certainly maintaining our existing revenue tools that the city has in its toolbox. And the city does not support legislation that would remove local control, that imposes unfunded mandates, takes away our ability to manage right-of-way, and takes away our authority in the areas of zoning, planning, utility, and transportation planning. Again, our council believes those decisions should strongly be made at the local level. And then specifically regarding economic development, we are a recipient of the DEED Host Community Economic Development Grant Program, and that is a grant program that recognizes the impacts of cities that have existing and operating landfills in the metro area. And so we use those funds for certain economic development projects every year for city infrastructure. It has to be for a public purpose. We can't use it like TIF to a developer, but we can use it for public improvements that help support a development or redevelopment project. So we have a supporting position so that we can have something there to continue to maintain our funding for those programs.
Question, how much, do you have any idea how much that is every year?
Is 450,000 a year, 440?
About that.
It's a little more than 400,000.
Thank you.
So that's the summation of the economic development positions that we have right now. Council will be talking about their positions for 2021 at their October work session. So as a matter of policy, if you have thoughts or ideas or changes on what you'd like to propose, we'll bring those forward to the city council for their discussion in October. It's gonna be a weird year though, I think, as things, if they open up, and how the legislature items that are on their docket and their priority.
All right, I'll open it up for discussion for the commission.
Mr. Chair, I would assume you'd want these to stay on here as priorities,
Oh, yeah.
the freeway
Yeah, I like the
landfills?
priorities. I have no,
Okay,
And I think it's nice because you don't have too much,
yeah, there was a lot on there before
right?
for us,
I mean, it was 3 times as long, I think.
yes.
anything missing from a city standpoint or any further discussions? I know this is just a discussion purposes only. There's no motion or anything on this one, just any recommendations?
Looks good.
Staff. See nothing on, oh, Chris?
I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but just to discuss the idea of the TIF legislation on that area as it's currently proposed with the Center Village Initiative. When the Center Village Initiative was initially being kicked off back in between 2016 and 2018, with the idea of bringing in retail tourism to the area, dedicating that area to a retail shopping district with mixed-use housing built in. Since then, we've seen a lot of downfall of similar areas. City Walk in Woodbury, Maple Grove area. Go look around, you see all these spaces for lease and empty buildings around there. I don't see a positive gain in turning that into a TIF district. In 25 years from now, I don't see that paying back. I don't see that retail shopping being a viable option going forward. And I think it's going to be a blighted area within 5 years if that's the plan we go with.
So I'll just add on to that, creating a TIF district doesn't mean you have to put it back into retail or shopping center capacity. The TIF is for anything for development in which the increment of property taxes go back into developing that designated area. So it can be fully redeveloped into kind of our center village image that we're trying to go to, more of a kind of a dual purpose capacity.
But half that purpose isn't going to be serving the community. That half that purpose won't exist, and the retail side of that purpose isn't going to be isn't a viable plan.
And that area can be changed into anything. It could be
Right,
retail, it could
exactly. It's a
be,
vision. The plan's a vision. It gives a framework. And with COVID, as was noted earlier, that's a change element, and we may have to contemporize our vision. So you're right. But that doesn't mean it won't be used for TIF. It could be used for
Right.
more housing. We might have more housing down there and less retail. Or
But we need a better
a
plan
sports
before.
center or something, so.
Yeah, and if it's something that seems viable, then we can open the discussion to it, making it into a TIF district. But until we have a plan, I don't think the conversation of making it a TIF district is the number one priority.
I think the center village is the plan and is a robust plan that we've put together over city staff. EDA, EDC has collaborated on this and created a whole center village vision to it, and I think it's one of the best ones that we had. I don't think any other city has come up with a vision for blighted or redeveloping areas that are looking rundown and needs redevelopment. The village is a redevelopment plan to repurpose it into multi-dimensional. It could be retail, it could be housing, multi-complexes, it could be entertainment. It's a whole zoning, rezoning kind of area. So what you see today as the Burnsville Center will not be the Burnsville Center in 5 or 10 years. That ball could be split in half. It could be, depending on where the market goes, it could be fully demolished and rechanged into different sections of development. I don't know if anyone else has any.
What I find interesting is on the north side of 42, you pretty much have everything full. You've got all the retail full. It's the mall itself that is the thing that's hampering. And if you look at Southdale, what they put in is they've got condos, they've got apartments, they've got a hotel. I mean, that's all what's made the difference at Southdale, and I think that's what can happen out here. And it's not retail, absolutely not. They'll be part of it because there'll be people there, but the retail is small in the end, I think.
And just kind of speaking to the mall, to kind of elaborate my point is, the city has no ownership in the mall. It's all owned by other third-party providers, and the city is creating a voice and collaboration and getting all the interested parties into discussions of how can we, now that, I'll pick on Sears has been out of there, and how can we redevelop it, get Sears involved in either selling their property to another developer, and kind of how to redevelop it, and that's what the whole center village and vision is kind of all about, and redeveloping.
And I believe all those redevelopments can happen without a TIF. We don't have a lot of land available in Burnsville. There's enough reasons to develop. And with CDL filing for bankruptcy and going into foreclosure, there's opportunity for somebody to buy it straight out and redevelop it in their own right without any incentives like a TIF zone. We can have the benefits of the tax base right away without waiting years and years for it to come back to us.
Go
I
ahead, Jenny.
I love your optimism.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we don't have TIF as a tool right now. And so this is seeking to be able to have a tool in the toolbox, and how it gets used and when it gets used has yet to be determined. And because it's TIF, it will be driven by a development. So you have to have a development that shows an increase in tax base to be able to create that increment, to use it for whatever purpose you would decide when that comes forward. So, but without the tool, you don't even get to decide or make that decision because it's not an option. So this is just about putting more tools in the toolbox, and those decisions will be made down the road. And you're absolutely right. It's a vision plan. It's not a PUD or specific development plan. That will come later, much later, and the market will be much different. But a lot of decisions to come later, absolutely. But this is a starting point, and we have to start somewhere. And this is where these things start.
Laura, you think you had a comment?
You literally took the words out of my mouth. I have right here that TIF is a tool in the toolbox. So the only thing I have to add anymore is that I think you've got exactly the right angle for a lobbying perspective, that the area that is formerly known as Burnsville Center can be the testing ground for the next vision of the Minnesota economy. And so I hope you continue to advocate for it strongly.
Okay, seeing nothing else on legislative agenda? So I
We
think
gotta
we'll,
go back to our,
well, we got one more before we go back.
oh, okay.
Thank you, commissioners, for the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. We'll move on to agenda item number, oh, that was number 6. Now we're going to agenda item number 7. Talking about the Economic Development Strategic Plan. I'll flip it over to Regina to give us an overview and background on that when she pulls up her PowerPoint.
I just would like to give kudos to Regina for helping run the meeting behind the scenes. She is taking the minutes, she is queuing up the PowerPoints, and she's presenting. So thank you, Ms. Dunn.
Fantastic job.
And she's filling 2 jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And helping with Zoom with Eric, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I need to.
Oh, yes, you do.
Thanks. Okay. So this is just a standing update. Oh, this is just a standing update that we've provided probably over the last year or so since the strategic plan was in place. And so each meeting I've been given an update on those 5 different items, starting out with ensure sustainability of the Burnsville Shopping Center and County Road 42 corridor and things that we've been doing working towards all of these goals. So Five Below is now open, so be sure to check them out if you haven't yet. I checked them out probably about a month ago and bought some cool, fun things. I bought a SpongeBob t-shirt for my son for like $5. It was awesome.
That's why it's fiverable.
I guess so. So check them out. As mentioned before, Sierra Trading and TJ Maxx Home Goods will hopefully be opening very soon. Looks like they're making some progress internally. And I'm probably going to mess up the name. Ineffable Brewing is coming soon. If you haven't checked out the news story on KSTP, please do. There was a really nice piece. Councilmember Gustafson was present, and they will be taking over what was the Nutmeg spot right by India Palace on County Road 5 and County Road 42. So check them out. I believe they're opening in about a month from now. Really, really cool to see somebody opening up during these times. And then the County Road 42 study is underway by Dakota County right now, and that stretches from Rosemont to the Burnsville very western border, the entire corridor, and they're evaluating the road and the sidewalks, trails within the area to see what type of improvements, any type of changes that will need to be happening throughout the entire corridor. So there is a survey, like a wiki map, that you can add comments and feedback to. If you haven't done that already, please do so. This will be ongoing for the next few months before an actual report is provided. But they'd love to hear from not only the businesses within the area, residents within the area, people that use the corridor, members of the public. So please take the survey and encourage your friends and networks to do so as well. And then a highlight, we were the recipient of a RIG grant for an AUAR. So a lot of acronyms here. So through the Dakota County Community Development Agency, I always want to say authority, but it's agency, they have a redevelopment incentive grant. And some of the funds can be used towards more planning type documents. So we applied for a $15,000 grant to be used towards an area-wide, no, I'm gonna get this wrong, what AUAR stands for. Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review. This is something that needs to occur for the Center Village area, really in order to get the areas shovel-ready for development. So we could have taken the approach that each developer that comes in, depending on the type of development, the intensity of the development, they may have triggered the need for an EAW, an environmental assessment worksheet, which adds a lot of time analysis for the developer in the future. You can also do this AUAR, which looks at a larger area, and you create development scenarios, and that document gets updated every 5 years and also based off of the different development scenarios. We are, as a city, taking that approach to do an AUAR. Many cities do this as well to help with their planning purposes. Basically, once this is done, this makes the area really shovel-ready for developers so that they don't have to go through that extra entitlement process. So the goal is, one, to help make this more attractive, get the impediments out of the way. Another thing is we're changing the guiding the land use to mixed use for many of the properties, basically from County Road 42 North, and then the very northern portion of the Burnsville Center properties to mixed use. In order to do that through the Metropolitan Council, they also require this environmental type work. So that's another trigger for doing the AUAR. It is budgeted amount that the City Council has approved for the 2020 budget. And so by obtaining the grant, we're helping bring down that cost. So the next strategic plan item through the Economic Development Strategic Plan is improve the image of 191 and the city. We've been meeting regularly, quarterly, with what we call our partners group, which includes the school district, the Chamber of Commerce, the city, and Experience Burnsville, or CVB. And we've kind of changed from just giving each other updates and working on sharing information to more of a let's roll up our sleeves and get some things done. So the next tasks that we're working on are a new resident packet and some type of celebration for our new residents. We'll be working on a 2021 Manufacturing Week plan, not only to highlight some of our cool industrial type uses within the city, but then also to highlight some of the cool things that they're doing in the school district through their programming. And then a future realtor event via Zoom. So we had a great turnout probably about a year and a half ago where we invited, actually it was the idea of a realtor, I think it was Coldwell Banker or Edina Realty, and they basically filled the room. And we, Skip and I gave them an update on the Economic Development Strategic Plan and different priorities, and really great feedback from that. So we thought, well, let's open it up and have a Zoom event. Commissioner Anderson.
I would combine your last one and your first one and not make it a new resident pack, which you can use it for anyway, but get it to the realtors so they can give it to prospective residents so they can understand the value of the school district.
That's a really good idea. Thank you. The next item is continued development within heart of the city. Gallery on the Parkway is now open. That's a new Chase development within heart of the city. Drive by it, it's a really, really nice building. Check that out. And
What
then
we're doing for rentals?
price range.
No,
Occupancy.
have they filled the building or are they?
Oh, I'm not sure on those numbers. That's a great question to follow up on. I don't know if Jenny, if you have any numbers.
Let's see here, is that the Roars project?
No, the Chase project.
Yeah, I don't know the Chase. I had read in the Business Journal, I think, that the Roars project on Travelers Trail, 95% occupancy after 3 months in heart of the city. Yeah, they are very complimentary to doing their projects in the suburbs for that reason. They said the demand is pretty high.
Well, and they've got a good view to downtown too, where the other one doesn't quite have the same, view of, from all their different apartments and stuff.
Right.
I have a quick, great testimonial on the Haven. So one of our tenants in one of our buildings is a young guy that's about 27, I would say. And he told me that he had just moved from a very nice apartment in Minneapolis to the Haven. And he said, even though I've lost some amenities that I have most of them like I wanted that are walkable, but at the same time, I'm really close to work. And it's expensive, but it's not as expensive as it was in Minneapolis. I'm going, that's exactly the story that we wanted to tell with those, getting those younger generations to come into the city.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. We are in the process of rezoning land within what's known as heart of the city. It will still be known as heart of the city, but we're changing the land to transit-oriented development. Now, a few months ago, the city council approved the transit-oriented development ordinance. So once the land is rezoned to TOD, then you can use the ordinance that matches. Right now, it's just kind of floating on the books right now. And then the Orange Line Bus Rapid Transit plans are in for review. The next item is enhance and build awareness around
Going back to the transit-oriented development, have you talked to Kraus Anderson at all that owns most of that vacant land?
we have been in contact with Kraus
Because
Anderson.
they're building a big apartment in downtown Minneapolis. You got this Haven story here, might be a good story to tell them.
There's potential interest. So the next item, enhance and build awareness around the city's existing housing and commercial programs and develop new programs as appropriate. And we talked a lot about this tonight with our discussion with Allers. But some of the things that we've been working on, kind of working towards in relationship to this goal are Grow Minnesota visits, and those have begun with the chamber as the lead. We are contributing some funds to that. I will report back when we do have the data. Our first visit was a virtual visit with the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce ambassadors and their board, kind of as a kickoff and a test case before we start meeting with businesses and having those virtual visits with businesses. So kind of a test case for us. The city and the Experience Burnsville, or CVB, have partnered in many ways with the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce typically has hosted listening sessions with themes around manufacturing, small businesses, the hospitality industry, and any opportunity that we have to join the chamber, we have just to share resources with the people that are attending, connecting them with resources. And then the Burnsville Cares program, we had 161 applications received. Have some notes here. 127 were deemed eligible. 20 ineligible and 14 were incomplete of those applications. I'm not sure of the status of the lottery, if that has occurred or that's in progress, but we hope to get the funding in the recipients very soon. The nonprofits have been cut checks, and so thank you, Economic Development Commission, for your quick feedback on development of this program. It's appreciated. More to come on this, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
so the lottery was done today, and so we're in the process of notifying those folks that they will get funded or not get funded in the next coming days. That list will become public, but we want to notify those that applied first.
Sure.
And then tonight, we have the start of the housing strategy discussion, so, and more to come on that. The next item, continue the city's position as a regional destination. So we've been doing some kind of fun stuff, not only from our economic development, planning, community development department, but we've started to integrate with some of our other departments and really collaborate. We're working with the new fire station number 1, to create a placemaking area. I encourage you, here's another opportunity for you to be engaged, and maybe some of you received an email today or yesterday regarding participation, giving your input on what you would like to see here and how you would like to interact with whatever this area will transform to. There will be a dedicated wall space and dedicated landscaping area for something, and what that something is, we're leaving it up to the community to help guide what that will be. So encourage you to participate, and hopefully, this just won't be a fire station, but this will be a, community gathering opportunity space. People may have a kid's birthday party and have a little, time for reflection, or maybe they'll be on a walk from a neighboring business and have a nice place to sit and enjoy, or for our firefighters, emergency personnel, a little space for them to get outside and enjoy. So I encourage you to participate in that effort. Tour de Flavor, I think I kicked that off at the last Economic Development Commission. Really fun event. Next year, we hope to do it again in some capacity. Hopefully we'll have some more, or we will have some more time to plan the event and to rethink some more strategy around that. But really fun event to highlight our racially and ethnically diverse businesses, and encourage people to get out and support restaurants during COVID. We had 3 Parks and Rec drive-in movies. This was sponsored by the Park and Rec Department, but we kind of tagged along and used our You Belong Here brand to provide our residents and maybe visitors. It was basically open to the public. So Burnsville residents or people from surrounding areas were welcome to attend. I think there were 180 vehicles that were allowed at any of the drive-in movies, times however many could fit in a car. So we had a great turnout. We provided cups with candy and some You Belong Here swag, as well as some promo information connecting people with restaurants through the Visitors and Convention Bureau, and then also to our placemaking opportunity for people to give feedback and to join at the groundbreaking. And then the You Belong Here song contest. So the winners were announced. I don't know if you heard the song. It's really, they were all fantastic. Like every entry was really cool. Anyway, so Ben and Shannon will get the opportunity to record their song at the garage. Really, really cool couple. They moved to Burnsville. Their family, they have, I think, 2 kids. And just, moved here for the nice backyard, and they really love their neighborhood, very complimentary of moving here. So we're just so excited to work with them, and we'll be integrating the song into different marketing avenues. And that's it if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the chair.
Any comments or anything on this agenda item?
This is really, really good, but I have one really off-the-wall comment. It's not related to this, but I want to share it.
Go ahead.
I usually owe people for my thoughts. This money that we're talking about, that we're proposing be used for housing redevelopment. I wonder if we approach the school district, and this goes back to some of the comments earlier tonight, and we offer to buy one of the elementary schools that's sitting there vacant, and it's gonna be mothballed and deteriorating and not looking good in the community. We then use some of the grants that we have available for demolition work. We demo it, we rezone it, we clean it up, we mark it up considerably in price, and we sell it to a residential developer, which generates new housing and new families in our community and a new tax base. Which now could potentially double that money, and now we leverage it even more. And we help the school district in the short term.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, it's my understanding that that opportunity does not exist in Burnsville because there's no elementary schools for sale in Burnsville. So they're going to repurpose, is it Sioux Trail, I believe is the one. It's my understanding that they're going to repurpose that. So there's Metcalf, which is in Egan, and then the other one I think was in Savage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hidden some, and then, but at the Diamond Head Education Center, the school board did agree or come to consensus to sell 2 outlots in the parking lot for redevelopment. So we've been in discussions with them, certainly along the way, and doing what we can to facilitate redevelopment, exactly like you said, Commissioner, exactly like that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
So you're not off the wall. You're not alone.
Too bad Sioux Trail isn't available. There's lots of land over there too beside
It
it.
would be an awesome residential development for part of the community that has been really beat up with closing of schools.
Yeah.
And that, those buildings are so old that without putting significant money in them, I'm afraid they're not adding a whole lot to the community anymore. I hate to say it, but that's what I feel.
All right, we'll close out agenda item number 7 there. There's no motion on this one. This is just an update. And we'll go back to, we postponed our election of chair and vice chair because Commissioner Fichette was having some technical issues with Zoom and she decided to come into council chambers. We'll go back to that one. I think, are we going to redo everything or are we just doing chair? Because I don't know.
Just the vice
Just
chair.
the vice chair? Okay. I know you had interest in, I think, where's it, vice chair or either or?
Either or.
Okay, we made a motion on the chair and then we postponed on vice chair. So I'll pull it back together, open it up to discussion on vice chair. Leave it up to discussion for the commission and then anyone online want to comment as well? Because I know we have interest with Anderson, Fichette. Am I missing anyone? Clevetter or anything? Just those 2?
It's those 2.
It's just 2. I'm open to either one serving as vice chair. I have no influence one way or another.
Are you both equally strong about it? Or does anybody
the
want to
task?
state your opinion on it and acquiesce to the other?
Well, I know I've got a few more years to serve, so I feel like being of service for the community and being able to help in the capacity of being a vice chair be something that I'd be very proud of doing and getting more immersed into the work of the board. So, but I know other people have strong feelings towards it too, so I'm not opposed to, spending another year just as a commissioner and not a chair or co-chair, but it would be something I would highly be interested in to be able to, get a little further into the work that we have here in Burnsville. And I have a lot of skills and
I think Laura, you had a comment?
That comment was several minutes old and the conversation has moved on.
Oh, I must have missed it. I'm sorry, Laura.
Okay.
Can
You
I
can
ask-
still, you can still comment on it if it has any relevance.
If it was desperately important, I would definitely have interrupted.
My apologies for missing it. All right,
Eric, are you still chair?
I am still chair, yes.
Yeah.
I'll yield to you.
Thank you.
Good.
You know, I'm not afraid to express my opinions. Whether
I
I'm,
know and you're not prohibited from expressing them anymore.
no,
Yeah. Well, good.
So I'll serve as needed.
So I need a motion to recommend Fischett for vice chair.
so moved.
A second?
All right, got a first and a second. I'll move it over to Regina for roll call.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuplick,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFever,
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveter,
Aye.
Commissioner Fitchett.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Gracious.
All right, thanks, everyone. That's the election of chair and vice chair. We'll go back to agenda item number 8, which is updates. I'll switch it over to staff. You have any updates to provide the EDC?
So, the city council meeting, that agenda item number 5, the Southcross and Portland Avenue land sale, that will go to September 22nd. I failed to mention that earlier. And then just, I encourage you to participate in the placemaking, public feedback. Great opportunity for you to help shape our community. That's all I have.
Excellent.
All right, thanks, staff, for the updates. And with that, there's no other items to come before us tonight. And at this time, would like to request a call for adjournment for the September 9th Economic Development Commission meeting.
So moved.
And a motion?
Second.
And a second? Well, shift it over to Regina for roll call.
I don't think technically we need to vote on it for closure, do we?
Probably.
Come on, I just want to say your names again.
Let Regina do it.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kuplick,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFever,
Aye.
Commissioner Cleveter,
Aye.
Commissioner Fitchett.
Aye.
Thank you.
And the motion carries. Thanks for joining in tonight.
Excellent.